Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on what is turned out to be a very, very sunny day here in Battersea. It's probably our summer. It'll last for a couple of days. It's Glastonbury this week as well, so I'm sure it'll start raining towards the end of the weekend. But you're all welcome. I'm really glad you joined us for this one. It's going to be a good one, I think. So it's Auto Enrolment legislative updates that are coming into play and how it can affect your business. My name is Mark Sapsford. I'm the Senior Business Development Manager for Paycheck, and I'm joined by Rebecca Dorian from our partners Chase de Vere, who's going to be hosting this webinar for you today. So speaking about the weather, we are approaching the summer, and unusually in payroll, obviously all the time we're working towards tight deadlines, and summer's a bit of a time where once you've got your P11Ds out of the way, you do tend to get a tiny bit of a lull, thankfully, while you think about your holidays for July and August. So during that time, I've been in the payroll industry for 24 years, and it never ceases to amaze me how often people don't get a chance to stand still and actually look at their payroll processes and how we operate and whether it's the most effective way of doing things. So of all of you who have joined us today, whether your client's files or not, I would say look at those processes, take some time out, look at your processes. Are there any duplication of effort anywhere? And by all means, reach out to me. We'll be putting a marketing email on the chat here. So do reach out if you want to have a call set up with me and we can discuss your current processes and see how we can improve those. We're doing lots of work with integrations with HR systems and things, which is helping a lot of people. And also about your journals as well, all your outbound stuff. So there's lots of food for thought there, and yeah, do reach out to us if you're interested in any of that. I would also like to say, thanks for joining this one. Do please follow us on LinkedIn, where we'll keep notified of any updates that are coming up and any new webinars we're doing. This session is being recorded, so we've already had a couple of people reach out to us saying they're not able to attend today. Don't worry, if you have registered, you will be shared with a recording of this webinar later. So if you do need to drop out for any reason, don't worry, you can catch up later. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Rebecca and hand over to you, Rebecca.
Lovely, thanks Mark, and welcome to everybody from me as well. So today's session is quite a nice short pension session, should be around about 15 minutes with some time at the end for questions as well. If you do have any questions as we go through today's session, do feel free to either raise your hand or pop those questions in the chat, and Mark will come back online at the end of the session and we can cover off any questions that anybody's raised then. So my name is Rebecca Dorian. I am a corporate independent financial advisor and I work for Chase de Vere. Chase de Vere are independent financial advisors, and all of the advisors at Chase de Vere are really proud of the fact that we are independent, and that just means that when we're looking at solutions for our clients, we can look at solutions from the whole market. I've been with Chase de Vere for 23 years this year, so I've got loads of experience on advising employers on employee benefit strategies, pensions legislation, and also supporting employees with understanding their benefits. Today we've got a focus on automatic enrolment legislation and a couple of changes that were announced towards the end of last year, and we're just waiting now for a bit of clarity on the date which these will be implemented. But in my discussions with Mark and with Isabella at Paycheck, we thought it would be a great idea just to give you some of the detail around these changes to help you plan in advance of when the government drops the date for when these changes will take effect with your business. So automatic enrolment has been around now since 2012, and automatic enrolment was some legislation that was introduced by the government to require all employers to have in place a qualifying workplace pension scheme and automatically enrol employees into that pension scheme as long as they met some specified criteria, which we'll come to a little bit later on in the session. So today's learning objectives to do with automatic enrolment legislation are to talk about what is changing and when, what the current rules are, how might it affect you and what you can do to prepare, and then how Chase de Vere might be able to help and support you. I think we can probably all agree that automatic enrolment, since it's been introduced, has been successful. The government's objective was to improve pension savings in the UK and remove some of the reliance of people relying on their state pension. So that has definitely been a success, but you'll see that these proposed changes are designed with the objective in mind to further improve pension savings, to pull more people into automatic enrolment and to further increase the amounts that people are saving. Because, you know, if we look at employees' pension pots and how much they are saving, if they're only contributing the statutory minimums, it is, for the majority of people, not enough to have a comfortable standard of living in retirement. So the government's aware they need to do more, and this is sort of baby steps to improve pension savings in that regard. So towards the end of 2023, legislation was passed via the Pensions Extension of Automatic Enrolment Act, which gave the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions the power to reduce the minimum age for automatic enrolment, so requiring employers and employees to start contributing earlier than they do currently, and also remove the lower qualifying earnings threshold, and that will require employers and employees to pay in more. Changes are expected sometime in 2024, so sometime this year. The government's obviously busy with general election stuff at the moment, but this is something that's on all government mandates and commitment from all parties. So we wouldn't expect to see any change to any of this, depending on the result of the general election. So the current rules: full and part-time employees would need to be automatically enrolled into their workplace pension scheme if they work in the UK, more than £10,000 a year, if they're not already a member of a suitable workplace pension scheme, and they are at least 22 and have not yet reached a pension age. And you'll see there, where an employee earns less than £10,000 a year, but more than the lower earnings limit, they do have the right to opt into a scheme, but you just don't have to automatically enrol them. But if they opt in, then you have to pay contributions on their behalf. So that's the current rules in terms of age. And then as an employer, you have a choice as to the basis in which you pay employee and employer pension contributions. There are options to make contributions on basic pay if you wish, but a lot of companies will use qualifying earnings as a basis to pay employee and employer pension contributions. And qualifying earnings are all earnings currently between 6,240 a year and 50,270, and that's basic salary plus holiday pay plus bonus plus overtime. So an individual's total P60 earnings would be included within that calculation, and all of that up from the lower earnings limit of 6,240 up to the cap of 50,270 would all currently be pensionable. So the change would mean that the auto enrolment criteria largely stays the same. So they still would need to work in the UK, earn more than 10,000 a year, not already be a member of another suitable workplace pension scheme. But you will post the change, you will have to automatically enrol all of your employees who are 18 years or above and below state pension age. And you'll see there on the final bullet that the qualifying earnings, so the amount of earnings that will be used to calculate an individual's pension contribution, will be all earnings between zero, so the first pound is pensionable, up to £50,270 a year. So the cap will remain for qualifying earnings. Okay, so in respect of the change in the minimum age for automatic enrolment, some food for thought to help you plan for that change as a business. You could budget for an additional 4 years contributions for any employees that you have between the ages of 18 to 22, and you can assess your workforce to calculate the impact of that. So how many employees do you have under the age of 22? Is this something that you're likely to be considering in the future, perhaps if you've taken on apprentices or school leavers, that sort of thing? Currently, if an 18-year-old earns more than 6,240, then they do have the option to join the pension scheme anyway. You just don't automatically enrol them. And we know, based on current opt-out rates, so this is the percentage of people who are put into a qualifying workplace pension scheme and then choose to opt out if they wish, that current opt-out rates are anywhere sort of from between 5 and 15%. So we know that most people, when they're automatically enrolled into a pension scheme, do stay in a pension scheme. So that's definitely something to account for and budget for if you do employ individuals who are under the age of 22. Have a think about your interns, perhaps an apprenticeship contract. So I know a lot of employers will take on summer interns from university, things like that, because they are usually likely to be younger, and whereas at the moment you're perhaps not considering funding pension contributions for that type of employee, you might want to account for that when you're taking those individuals on. Make sure that your admin processes are all up to date when the change takes effect. So, if you're managing the statutory correspondence that's being issued, make sure that you update the age on that. Make sure that if you've got a process in place to assess your workforce, to catch any individuals who do need to be automatically enrolled, make sure that that's accounting for the lower age limit. And this is something that if Paycheck don't support you with already, that Paycheck can support you with. So if you wanted to have a chat with Mark about Paycheck's auto enrolment support service, they can really take the headache out of a lot of the administration to do with automatic enrolment for you, including issuing your statutory correspondence, doing your compliance declarations online, submitting your pension contributions to the provider, that sort of thing. So have a chat with Mark if that's of interest. But if you do manage that in-house, then just make sure that you ensure that your admin processes are up to date so that you catch that change of age. Any casual temporary contracts might now fall into the scope of automatic enrolment. So that's something to consider. Now, you could, for that type of worker, use a mechanism called postponement if you wish. Postponement is where you have the ability to postpone your obligation to automatically enrol a worker for up to 3 months from their start date with the company. If you choose to use postponement, you have to issue a postponement notice to that individual, and the postponement notice does give the individual the right to join within that 3-month period, but in practice hardly anybody exercises that right. So that can be a way to manage casual and temporary workers if that's a consideration for your business. Moving on to the removal of the lower earnings limit for qualifying earnings. So as a business, you can budget for additional employer contributions based on having to fund contributions on an additional £6,240 a year of pensionable salary. That's an extra £187.20 for the employer and £312 gross for the employee, obviously assuming that your contributions are based on qualifying earnings in the first place. You'll want to consider how you'll communicate the change to existing members. You don't have to let them know that this is happening, but in our experience with anything like this, where there's going to be an increase in contribution, perhaps when you're leading up to your 3-year re-enrollment and you're going to be putting people back into a scheme that have previously opted out, it's always good practice to give your employees heads up and a warning that this is happening. It's to do with a legislative requirement, so there's no choice on this, but here's some information so that you can decide what to do in this respect. So if you want us to support you with any templates, email or letter templates to help you communicate to the change to your employees, do reach out. We'd be happy to provide those. We're yet to discover, obviously, because the change isn't in effect, but we're yet to discover whether the changes will result in increased opt-out rates for employees. So whether this increase in contribution and drop in the minimum age for automatic enrolment, is that going to increase those percentages that we talked about earlier, that sort of roughly 5 to 15% of people who opt out generally, is that likely to increase? And I've put a note there just to say that it would be good practice as part of your annual pensions governance process to capture your current opt-out rates if you don't do so already, because with your employer responsibility or employer duties in acting in the best interests of members and making sure that your employees have the best retirement outcomes, that would be sort of good data to have available for future reviews if opt-out rates have increased. So you've got that measure and you'll be able to demonstrate, well, actually, the opt-out rates increased because it was down to affordability. My employees couldn't afford to pay the additional contribution, or, we had a high proportion of our 18-year-olds opt out. So capture your opt-out rate currently, and that's something that Paycheck could be able to support you with. If you reach out to your account manager at Paycheck, then they'll be able to discuss supporting you with that information if you need any help. As with the previous change, do make sure that your admin processes are up to date. So amend those statutory letters if you're managing those yourself. Amend your assessment process to make sure that you're deducting contributions on the correct amounts. You'd be surprised how many people were caught up with not paying the correct amount into pensions when we were in the very early stages of automatic enrolment, and people were phasing in pension contributions and having to increase those over time. The pensions regulator is fairly relaxed. If you're audited, if you've made a mistake, as long as you make that mistake good, and put people in this position that they would have been had you increased the contributions at the right time. But rather than getting into that, just if you had that off at the past, just make sure that your admin process will catch that increase initially. And if Paycheck are managing that for you, then obviously they'll take the responsibility on your behalf to make sure that that's correct. And then my final point on the increase to the amount that people will be paying is that you might want to consider salary exchange as a mechanism for paying employee contributions into the plan. And that might be a nice way to communicate this change to employees as well. Salary exchange, very simply, is a tax efficient way of structuring your employees' pension contributions to save on employee and employer national insurance. Now, we did run a separate salary exchange webinar with more detail on salary exchange. So if you do want a copy of that webinar to take a look and find out more about salary exchange, then the marketing at Paycheck email should be in the chat, so you can reach out to Paycheck and they will send you a copy of that webinar. Or if you just tap salary exchange into the chat, we will make sure that you get a copy of that webinar sent over to you. You can also, if you want to, just reach out to me and I'll have a conversation with you about salary exchange relative to your business. But the nice thing about salary exchange is because it saves money for employees and employers, it can help then communicate, okay, well, your employee cost is going to go up by £312 a year, but to help you with that, we've implemented salary exchange, which is going to save you X amount in tax. So that's why I mentioned salary exchange there, and it's a good consideration for your employees. The final slide from me then is just around how some thoughts and ideas about how Chase de Vere might be able to help and support you. So you are very welcome to discuss any aspect of this change in legislation or any concerns about your current pension plan or employee benefit strategy with me. So if there's anything that you're concerned or worried about, or maybe you're getting feedback from your employees on any aspect of your employee benefit strategy, do reach out. Those conversations with me are always no obligation, and there is never a charge for those. There is only a remuneration agreement between Chase de Vere and an employer when those service provisions have been agreed. So basically, if you decide in the future that you want to work with Chase de Vere on implementing a salary exchange project or a benefit strategy, then we'll pre-agree what that would look like in terms of cost, and as long as you're happy, then we'll move forward. But there's never any surprise fees or charges for any of that. Some of the things that we can help with, so cost saving strategies, market reviews of your pension, save money for your employees, or have a look at any risk benefits, life insurance, medical insurance, that sort of thing. So we can review those for you and make sure that you're getting the best rates. Complete pension scheme audits. So you might have had a change in personnel or something like that. So if you wanted to have an audit of your pension scheme just to make sure that you're issuing the letters when you should be, and that you would pass a pensions regulator audit, then do reach out, because we offer that service. If you're finding you're struggling with staff retention, or you wanted to see how your benefits measured up to benefits provided by your competitors, we can provide you with data on that. And then finally, financial education for employees. So we do a lot of support with our existing clients around making sure that their employees understand their benefits package, and how that supports them and their family, just to make sure that you get the maximum benefit for your company pound, your company spend on that. In terms of salary exchange, so happy to explain that further. We've also got a salary exchange brochure, which I'll get over to Isabella. She can send that out with the webinar, because that's got some example pay slips which help bring salary exchange to life a little bit. So I'll make sure that that's sent out with the webinar too. And it's really easy to calculate the employer national insurance saving, which you can use then to offset your additional costs. So we can calculate that for you, or help with your project. And then support with proactive communication. So we will keep Paycheck informed as soon as a date is known when this legislation will hit, and employers will have to comply. And then you have my contact details at the bottom there, so my email and my mobile number. So that is the final slide from me. I'll just move back, I think, to my contact details, just in case anybody wanted to grab those. And were there any questions? I saw one question pop up, Mark, but I think I answered.
There are, Rebecca. Yeah, got quite a few. So
okay.
Yeah, obviously one of them you mentioned about the letter templates. Somebody's asked you can provide an example of that postponement notice, please. So yeah, we can certainly get that sorted for you. We've got a question here. We pay on basic earnings so already from £0, but at 9% or more. Does the rate change in future? And that's kind of linked into another question as well that we've had about, do you think that the government is going to increase minimum pension contributions any further?
So I think since automatic enrolment has been introduced in 2012, as an industry, we all felt that as though the minimum contribution requirement that the government has set wasn't high enough. It wasn't going to be enough to give employees a good standard of living in retirement. But obviously the government's response to that was that they had to start somewhere, and it was down to affordability and improving pension savings for the masses. So we hope that the government will increase employee and employer pension contributions moving forwards, because that's in the best interests of employees having the best outcomes in retirement. When that will be, though, is another question. I think, had we not been through the cost of living crisis, energy crisis, then that may have been sooner. We believe that these changes that we've outlined today are the government's baby steps, sort of initial toes in the water to catch more people into automatic enrolment and increase pension contributions by a small amount. The concept of automatic enrolment in the UK came from Australia and New Zealand, who completed automatic enrolment first, and they have completed quite significant increases actually in pension contributions since they implemented automatic enrolment before us. The current Australian employer pension contribution, and hold on to your chairs, I don't think that we're anywhere near this in the UK at the moment, but the current Australian employer pension contribution is 10.5% of basic salary, and they're already increasing that to 12% by 2025 as well. The employee commitment in Australia is 4% of basic pay, so you can see there that the total contributions into the Australian superannuation scheme are a lot higher than in the UK. So as things stand, if you pay contributions on basic salary already, then that change in qualifying earnings isn't going to affect you. But if you don't operate those pension contributions on salary exchange already, still look at it, because it's a really nice message for your employees in this environment of saving money and making sure that employees get the best outcomes in retirement. Do still look at salary exchange if you don't do that already. Your planning will be around the decrease in the minimum age for automatic enrolment, so down from 22 to 18.
Brilliant. We've had lots of requests for the link to that webinar as well, which is really good. So yeah, it's well worth requesting that. Another question here: would employees still be able to choose to pay a lower amount than the statutory minimum as long as we declare that on the pension portal record?
Yes. So if the pensions regulator, it's a longer answer than yes, so apologies. If the pensions regulator audited an employer, what they would want to see with an employee journey is that they were automatically enrolled into a qualifying workplace pension scheme with whatever the minimum contribution requirements are. So let's say that they were the qualifying earnings 3% from the employer and 5% from the employees. That is what the pensions regulator would want to see. If an employee opts out of that arrangement, then you can, if you want to, pay lower than the 3 and the 5% into the pension scheme because they've opted out of a qualifying arrangement. So you can pay, you know, whatever your agreement that you want to make with your employees. Be careful that you're not introducing any form of discrimination amongst workers and you're not offering something to somebody that you're not offering to somebody else, but technically within the legislation you can do that. All you would then need to do is make sure that on the every 3-year anniversary of your original staging date, that worker who's paying contributions lower than the statutory minimum, you've got to put them back in again with contributions at the statutory minimum. And if they opt out, then you can then pay the lower contributions. We wouldn't recommend anywhere in any of your correspondence with that employee that you say, if you opt out of this pension scheme, we will pay lower, because the regulator won't like that. That will be deemed as you incentivizing somebody inadvertently, because you know you're trying to act in the best interest of your members and provide a pension that's affordable, but the regulator would deem that as you incentivizing them to opt out of a qualifying scheme. So your job is to put them in on the prescribed minimum contribution basis, but if they opt out, then they can pay lower if they ask you if that's possible.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question: do salary exchange and salary sacrifice mean the same thing?
Yes, they do. We financial advisors prefer to call the mechanism salary exchange because you're exchanging a pre-tax pension contribution for an additional employer contribution of the same amount. The word sacrifice implies that you're giving something up. So salary sacrifice is, if you like, the old way of describing salary exchange, but they are exactly the same thing. Yes.
Brilliant. Got a few more questions yet, so I'm not sure if we'll be able to fit them all in, but don't worry, anybody that's asked a question, we will come back to you offline afterwards. Got one here for you, Rebecca. We employ interns usually for an initial 2-week period, but if they do well, we may invite them back up for 14 weeks to do ad hoc hours. Usually second year university students, so around 19 years of age, they may be on the cusp of the LEL. So what would the best practice be, please? Postpone for the initial period and then include them if we invite them back for some replacement. Pension is salary sacrifice.
Yes, that would be an instance where postponement would work very well especially if sounds like there's quite a few. It's not just a 1 or 2 interns, which would potentially be easier to manage. And if there's that option for the intern's contract to continue, where you would want to provide some sort of reward or similar benefits to the rest of the workforce, then that's where postponement can work well. You don't have to use the full 3 months postponement if you don't want to. So for the individual that asked that question, I would say, because there was quite a lot of detail in there, if that's something that you did want to pick up with me offline, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you and help you with best practice. But as a very broad answer, yes, that's kind of what postponement is for, really.
Brilliant. And we'll come back to you on that, and we'll share Rebecca's contact details as well if you haven't had a chance to jot them down when this webinar's been going on. And I forgot to mention, for any latecomers to the webinar, then we did record the session, so we will be sharing that out at the end as well. So don't worry, you can catch up on anything you missed. And then we just have one more question, and I think I know the answer to this one. Apologies, did you say we don't have a date for this yet?
No date for this yet. So the government's in consultation with pension providers and employers at the moment, but they have said that it will be sometime this year.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And in all of this, do you think anything's likely to change with the change of government?
We don't think so, because both Conservative and Labour are both committed to automatic enrolment as a concept, and this was something that was collaborative in terms of its establishment and ongoing sort of development. So we don't think so. Both parties have a mandate to improve pension savings in the UK and remove the reliance from the states. So, no.
Brilliant. So that's it from us today. Just a final wrap up. Thanks very much, Rebecca. It's been really useful. We've had lots of requests for that webinar again, like I say, around salary exchange. So it's definitely a hot topic. We are really keen to give you as much, detail about things that matter to you as we can. So, do post to us, any other ideas. We've got a few that have come through. So we've got the option of post-general election webinar with details of any changes to pension employee benefits, NHS waiting lists and why healthcare benefits are more important than ever, and current retirement planning attitudes, what are your employees thinking? So do let us know if any of those subjects appeal to you, and obviously we can set up another webinar, or if you've got anything else that you'd really like to focus on, we'll be happy to do new ones. So like I say, do join us and follow us on LinkedIn, both Rebecca and as a paycheck, so you can keep abreast of what we're posting out there, and look forward to speaking to you all soon. Thanks very much for joining.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.